Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's virtual event of the 6th Unbound Book Festival. My name is Janelle Beavers, and I am the president of the Unbound Book Festival board. Tonight's panel is about representation in publishing, and we have a wonderful group who will be chatting here with us tonight. As you know, the festival has always been completely free to attend, and this would not be possible without the generosity of the hundreds and hundreds of people who have supported us financially over the years. On behalf of everyone who volunteers for Unbound and everyone who attends these events, we're so grateful to each and every one of you who has been kind enough to give. A list of everyone who has given over the past 2 years is on the website, and if you'd like to contribute yourself, you can do so by going to the website and clicking on the donate button. We're a registered nonprofit and we are completely run by volunteers. So everything we receive goes directly into putting these events on. Thank you for your support. Support also comes from the City of Columbia, specifically the Office of Cultural Affairs and the Convention and Visitors Bureau. KBIA and Como Magazine are our media sponsors. A full list of our sponsors and supporters is available on the website. Please remember that if you miss an event, everything is available for viewing or reviewing on both our Facebook page and on YouTube. If you haven't already, please do take a moment to review the whole schedule on our website and plan to attend as many events as you like. While you're there, you can also sign up for the festival newsletter, which goes out on Monday mornings and will keep you up to date for what to expect each week. And please always tell your friends about the festival. As you know, Unbound is all about audience interaction, and we welcome and encourage questions from our viewers. I know you guys aren't here to see me this evening, so I am going to turn it over to our moderator this evening, Jennifer McCauley, who we're happy to have with us tonight.
Hi.
Hi, Jennifer. How are you?
Hi. Hey.
It's good to see you. We're so happy that you're here and can't wait to hear from all of our panelists.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, good luck.
Thank you. All right. Well, this is so exciting to be here tonight to hear from our wonderful panelists. We have the incredible Parnisha Jones, the incredible Stephanie Williams, and the incredible Beth de Guzman here tonight. And the topic of our panel tonight is representation in publishing. So we'll be talking a little bit about how these wonderful ladies got into publishing, but also some of their efforts in diversity and inclusion. So I will read you, I'll go over their bios first. Parnisha Jones is the author of Vessel Poems, winner of the Midwest Book Award and featured as one of the 12 books to savor by the Oprah magazine. Jones has been honored with the Gwendolyn Brooks Poetry Award, the Margaret Walker Short Story Award, and the Aquarius Press Legacy Award. Named one of the 25 writers to watch by the Guild Complex and one of Lit 50's Who Really Books in Chicago by New City Magazine. Her work has appeared in anthologies including She Walks in Beauty, A Woman's Journey Through Poems, and The Ringing Ear, Black Poets Lean South. Jones has been featured on PBS NewsHour, the Academy of American Poets, and ESPNW. She is the director at Northwestern University Press. Her acquisitions have garnered some of the highest literary honors, including the National Book Award, Kingsley Tufts Pulitzer Prize finalist, Hurston Wright Legacy Awards, NAACP Image Awards, LA Times Book Award, and others. Our next panelist is Stephanie Williams, who is the director of Wayne State University Press and was involved in the creation of Unbound Book Festival while she was marketing manager at the University of Missouri Press. Stephanie has worked as a bookseller and in marketing positions in publishing for nearly 30 years. She's a board member of the Association of University Presses and serves on the association's Equity, Justice, and Inclusion Committee. And our next panelist is Beth de Guzman. Beth de Guzman is the digital and paperback publisher of Grand Central Publishing and imprint of Hatchet. She also leads the editorial and marketing publicity teams of Forever, Grand Central's romance and women's fiction imprint, and acquires titles in the suspense thriller, women's fiction, historical fiction, and commercial nonfiction categories. Okay, so we're so excited to have everyone here tonight.
Right. Thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Right.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. So I have some questions about some of your work as publishers, and we'll also talk about representation in publishing, which is kind of the topic of this panel. So kind of an open-ended question, but how did you all get into publishing? Why publishing? Why is this the route that you took?
I'll go first. I am such a cliche. I have always been a bookworm. I was one of those kids who, when she got home from school, went to bed, had a book, and had to be called down to dinner. I just never, ever stopped reading. And when I was in college, that was UT Austin, Hook 'em Horns, by the way. I was going to school. I was working as a waitress, and I had like this light bulb went off in my head. It was like, oh my God, what I want to do is get paid to read. So I knew I was going to end up in New York City and get a job in publishing. And I am so lucky that I've had that job for decades now, and I still love it. Hopefully that's obvious.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump on and say very similarly. I was an avid reader as a child. But in my late teens and early 20s, I worked in record stores and bookstores. And it was my last job at a big independent bookstore, Boulder Bookstore in Colorado, that I had interactions with publishers. And it just really made me realize that it's a line of work that I could pursue and succeed in. So, and that's how I did it.
Wow. Really?
I would say, I also was a big book person. Every weekend, my mother would take my brother and I to the Evanston Public Library. So I lived in libraries early on. I read in libraries. I read in my mother's kitchen. And I really didn't plan to actually get into publishing. I just wanted a job where I didn't have to pantyhose and I could be an artist and I could be a poet. And I didn't really understand until the world of publishing opened up to me as an intern in college that I could actually work with the very same people I wanted to be one day as a writer. And so I felt like working in publishing was how I could keep my sanity as an artist.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And so kind of on that note, so Stephanie Williams, you've done some, you said in an earlier version of your life that you were a poet, violinist, and an actor who briefly appeared in a Steven Soderbergh film, which is pretty awesome. And Parnisa Jones, you're, in addition to being the appointed director of Northwestern University Press, you're a highly celebrated poet and the author of Vessel, which was published by Milkweeds, and you've received so many awards. So, and Beth, I'm wondering if you have creative inclinations too. So I'm wondering if for those of you who are coming from a kind of creative background, how do those creative instincts transfer over into your publishing life, or do you feel there is kind of a symbiosis between the two?
This is really generational, but I want to pick up on something Parnisha said about not wanting to wear pantyhose. So there was a time in the world where most jobs that came with a salary required women to wear pantyhose. And this was also something I wished greatly to avoid. And so the idea of not wanting to work in a corporate enterprise to kind of create things to enrich corporations was one of the kind of difficulties that I had in finding a path, finding a way to make a living. I like about my work that it's finding solutions to every problem, being engaged in the main work, coming up with new ways to create books, to promote books, to talk about books, to talk to people about books. All of it engages all of that creative energy for me.
Wow, great.
I also like the fact that our work is not mundane, even if we might be doing mundane things every now and then. I always say that one of the things that I love about this job the most is every season I'm meeting new people.
Mm.
We have a whole new batch of authors that come in every season, and we work on their books. And some of them, it's their life's work, or they're getting tenure for that book, or it might go on to be a bestseller. But every season, you're dealing with a new set of creators, a new set of cultural workers. And I love that. I kind of feel like this is the perfect job where I used to have this dream when I was a little girl that I wanted to meet everybody in the world. And do that working in publishing. Of course, I've matured. I'm not sure I want to meet everybody. But that being said, this is one of the jobs where you actually get exposed to the world and so many different cultures and so many different ways of telling a story or a narrative or a history. And it changes. Every 6 months we got a new tribe that comes in that becomes part of us and our mission and our history.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
So, two things about creativity in terms of my experience. Number one, when I was in college, I took a lot of theater classes. So it's amazing how handy that is when you're in publishing, because you're always talking to people, right? You're always trying to engage them, whether it's an agent, you're trying to get them to submit to you, you're talking to Salesforce, trying to get them to really love your book, talking to an author, talking to an agent, convincing them that your company is the best for their work. So being able to emote that way, I think, has been so useful, having, and also just being in a virtual environment like this, being able to project. So those theater classes I took in college, even though I took them for fun, they've actually been so useful. And the other part of creativity I love about working in publishing is that people can think this is really dorky, but working in a team, that collaborative effort, I just find that so creative. Just feeding off each other, just even daily problem solving. We have this book here, we have this book there, they're too similar. How can we fix that problem? So just talking to each other, watching the art directors do their work, coming up with covers for books. It's just it's like, to me, it's like it's an engine that feeds itself. And working with the authors, well, oh my God, just watching that creative process, it's just amazing.
Wonderful. I love that. I love that. So you're kind of feeding off the creativity. So it's kind of like I really like that. It's great. So, I guess we were kind of talking about, at least we kind of touched on that a little bit, but what gratifies you about doing the work that you do? Or, where do you find gratification in the work that you're doing? In any of the projects that you're working on. So this could be maybe your creative project, or it could be in in your publishing efforts.
It's being able to have somebody tell their story. One of the great things about this job for me and the great experiences is that I get to be curious about the world, and I get to learn about human beings that maybe on the surface might be very, very far away from me and my experience. But my job is to help them tell their story. And I think, especially in publishing and what publishing is always represented, at least in the United States, now more than ever, to kind of bring people to the forefront who have not had the opportunity to either, as we talk about the whole theme of this, representation, but just giving somebody a space, carving out a space for somebody to tell their story is really the most gratifying thing for me. I mean, every single book we publish, I still to this day, I just celebrate my 18th year at Northwestern. Still to this day, every book that comes hot off the press, I smell the pages because I'm smelling somebody's story. I'm taking it in, and we worked really hard to bring it out in the world and to see the reactions of the authors when we get their books in the mail, or when we were in person, when they were at their launch parties and different things like that. I mean, you're helping somebody tell their life. You're archiving somebody's life. You're helping them. You're helping them have a voice in the world, but you're also kind of the gatekeeper of it, and you keep it safe.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
on a selfish level, one of the things I love that just keeps me inspired about my job is what Pranisha was talking in terms of finding voices. Oh my gosh, just when you're reading something and you feel in your gut that this is just an amazing voice, an amazing work. It's so addictive. No matter how many years I've been in publishing, how many books we've published with such expectations. And then, not every one of them fails. Not every one of them works. So many of them underperform, but yet you just want to keep on reading submissions because you want to find that next great voice that you can share with the world, the way Pranisha was talking about. And the other thing too that I really love about it is after you've helped an author share their book with the world, going back to it like 15 years later, realizing that book is still selling. Let us figure out how to find a new audience for it. Let us package it up with a new cover. Maybe the author can do some new material for it and finding new readers for it. It's like this legacy. It just goes on and on and on. And you can start to feel a little kind of soft and you kind of want to cry because it's just so wonderful knowing you're part of this thing that can just keep on going and going and it can keep touching people's hearts.
Yeah, I would say that coming from a marketing background in publishing, not only those interactions with authors and kind of shaping the message that we send out to the world around their story, is those interactions with booksellers and with readers where, watching their eyes light up when they, find a book that speaks to them, that they can hold close to their heart. And I also want to say that now having, being a press director at Wayne State and being able to do things like decide how to spend money to be sure that people from underrepresented backgrounds are able to find the time to do the work, to find the time and space to review proofs, to promote their book to audiences that are also often underrepresented in what we do. That is the true gratification of this job for me.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's absolutely wonderful. So and this is maybe dovetailing off of what you were saying, Stephanie, that you're all committed to working on diversity and inclusion. Can you talk about some of your efforts to make publishing more inclusive, or at least what your kind of commitments to making publishing more inclusive?
So I'm gonna start in the university press space. I do not believe there has ever been, other than Howard University when they had a press, but certainly not an African American woman press director. And so within the last 2 years, Parnisha and I have become university press directors.
Congrats! That's so great.
Thank you. But publishing has a real problem, and I'm probably losing track of where you wanted to go. I'm sorry, Jennifer. And so it's publishing was traditionally kind of the enclave of wealthy people who had friends who wrote, and through this kind of social promotion, we've gone for 300 years, in university presses, of being very white, cisgendered, able. And it's only in the last 5 or 6 years that there have been really efforts begun to diversify, to be more inclusive, to be more just, in fact, in the work that we do. And the Association of University Presses has some projects underway. I know the Association of American Publishers has projects underway. I know that just about every professional association I can think of is addressing this, but none of us know right now what the success or what the outcome of these efforts is. Are we doing the right things? Yeah, if 10 years from now, our offices and our lists look different, but it's not something we can know right now.
I will say, I'm kind of two minds about what you're talking about in your question, Jennifer, because I do agree with Stephanie. A lot of efforts in these last, 5 or 10 years have gone towards more inclusion or representation or diversifying. However, I have this other side of my brain as to why. Is it more of a response to basically everything in our world coming to a head, whether it's Me Too, whether it's Black Lives Matter? And so how much of this is forced versus how much of it is a response? And how much of it is actually engagement? How much of it is actually building a community that's going to sustain these wonderful ideas and different things that we want to do? The truth of the matter is, I think back to looking at Toni Morrison's documentary. She, was one of the prominent Black editors in, the 80s and 90s, and just kind of what she experienced working with the New York houses, and what she had to fight to get through, the works of like Toni Cade Bambara or, Angela Davis. And I think about now, just in the spaces that we're in right now, and just kind of the history of publishing in this country. Publishing was built to keep people of color out. There's no question about it. The infrastructure of publishing was never meant or built to include us. And so as we're trying to address these things now and make something right now in the 21st century, how much of the groundwork, how much of investment are we going to put in to sustain and not just answer for the moment right now? And that's where I kind of go back and forth about all these different efforts, initiatives, which are great. But I also know that we're, in a moment where there's a fatigue, we're in a pandemic, all these different things going on in the world. And so I'm wondering, is this going to be just something for the moment right now that'll kind of flicker out? Or is it something that we're actually creating and supporting to be sustained, and we want to make actually a new normal and not just extracurricular in what we do in publishing?
I have to say, I'm feeling very, very hopeful. I've worked in publishing for a while, always in the New York City setting. So I've worked in three of the big houses, and there have been all of these efforts to increase diversity and inclusion. And Pernicious, as you were talking about flickering, I've seen that happen. I've seen the light go on, and you're very hopeful, and nothing really happens because there's no true engagement from top down. But what's happened starting last year, it just feels so much more real to me. And a lot of it is not just lip service. Oh, we want to buy more books from authors from typically underrepresented communities, but it's also looking inward at the infrastructure itself, at our companies ourselves, actually acknowledging to ourselves that, you know what, we need more diversity just in our own company, and putting some real goals behind that. We need more diversity of voices involved in acquisitions to make sure that we are publishing things for every community. And there are even more steps to make every single person accountable by making it an official personal goal of theirs every year, so that they're actually sitting there and thinking about, what can I, as one person, do in my company that is actually meaningful to me as part of my diversity. So I'm feeling very, very hopeful. And I know there are a lot of young kids. I think my mic is buzzing. There are a lot of young kids who, and thank goodness they've got so much energy. They want change to happen right away, right? They're never happy with just, let's keep moving things on. They want things now to happen. And so sometimes when there's a directive from up above, they feel maybe it's performative, but I I'm such an eager beaver. I tend to look at the world with rose-colored glasses. Maybe that's obvious. I always say, always advocate for change, but celebrate even a little win, because a little win for somebody who's been around in publishing for so long, a little win means so much. And it's up to us to keep making sure that we keep winning and winning and winning and winning. So I feel very positive, I guess is what I'm saying. I'm really hopeful. And I'm determined to do my part to make it keep happening and not die off.
One thing I will say also, and I absolutely agree, in talking with the press that I work with, and, obviously we're putting together new initiatives with the press, with the university. And what I've told, the team that I work with is, well, we've always been diverse. And that's something that we should highlight, we should celebrate what we've always done, but, expand it and branch it out. The other thing too is, we need to allow for ourselves to discover, make mistakes. Every initiative we do is not going to work out and necessarily change the world or change the industry. We have to have a great deal of empathy for why we committed to this job and putting books out in the world. And this is a true part of humanity. This is how humanity is kind of keeping itself in check in some ways, when everything else is, unhinged. But I hope that when we allow ourselves to make these different changes, that we also allow ourselves to stumble, to make mistakes, and give each other the space and forgiveness to do that, to know that not everything that we put forward is going to work.
Yeah.
I think working in publishing, I think we allow ourselves to make mistakes, right? It's like that every single book you buy will be a bestseller. You're always thinking, oh, I paid too much for that. Oh, I should have done a different package. Right. So yeah, I see. So I think we're used to making mistakes and trying to do better next time.
Yeah. Yeah, these are all really inspirational answers. Appreciate it. I'm in lit journal publishing, so it's like I'm trying to think about how that would apply to my own stuff too. So I'm like, thank you, everyone. I appreciate that. So yeah, I mean, on that subject that we're kind of still talking about, so there's a most recent survey that says that 84% of the industry is white. So what can publishers working in the industry do? What can we do to make publishing more inclusive? So I know that so many of you are doing so much, but what can we do?
Yeah, there are a lot, as I was saying, there are a lot of projects going on. Jennifer, I think you're referring to the Lee and Low survey, which was done in 2015 and then again in 2019. Oh. And so the major finding in 2019 was that the percentages hadn't shifted much, but there was a shift. Okay. And so, and one of the things that says to me is how long it takes to really demonstrate that there has been a sustained commitment, and that there is also that the commitment moves along also. So, it's not just about programs that support internships from underrepresented groups, and there are several of those, and more of those being started all the time. But it's also about retaining those people in positions at presses, at publishers, as they advance through their careers. And so it's getting past the novelty phase into practical engagement with those communities.
Right. Yeah.
So one of the things that I was talking earlier about looking inward and looking at our place and understanding that we could always have more diversity inclusion. So we have a lot of goals in place and very real initiatives. Number one, we've got a recruitment subcommittee, and one of our goals is to really expand who we outreach to for hiring, for filling open positions. So it's, and we're talking about outreach to college students, just to make sure they understand there are all these open positions in publishing, and reaching out to making sure that we don't place as much emphasis on previous experience in publishing when we're looking to hire somebody. Because as we've all said, historically, publishing has been very, very, very white. So if you want to be more inclusive and more diverse, you cannot keep looking for people with previous publishing experience. And what you need to do are look for skills that are transferable, communication skills, problem solving skills, interpersonal skills. And when you're doing job descriptions, you're not talking in code about specific publishing things, but talking about skill sets that you can bring over.
Right.
And then one of the things that we're very, very aware of is New York City is a very, very expensive place to live. And again, that could just narrow the pool of candidates. So one of the things that every publishing company in New York City has done is increase the level of starting salary for assistants. So it's more affordable. And I have to say, one of the silver linings of the pandemic is that we all learned how to work remotely, and we all figured out that you can do things working remotely. You don't have to be in an office. So again, that has opened up a big, big pool of candidates. We don't expect people to come to New York nowadays. We take it on a case-by-case basis. On the hiring manager, are you willing to work with somebody who's working remotely? And most of the cases, because we've seen it works effectively, the answer is yes. And it just, as I said, it just opens us up to a whole pool of candidates that we've never, ever had before.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. There's silver linings that come out of the pandemic.
No, and that's what we've learned, because we're still working remotely at the press at Northwestern, and it's been, in this last year of the pandemic, we were able to keep every book on schedule. Nothing was delayed.
Yeah.
And we realized, what a Herculean feat that was, just seeing everything around us just come apart. We kind of came together as a team and realized that, we work just as good remotely as we do in the office. We're going to be hiring 4 new positions, 2 senior editors, a digital content manager. And we also, one of the initiatives that we have, we're going into our 3rd fellow as part of the Mellon Foundation, the Diversity Fellow. And so we bring in young people or people of any age who are in fellowships, apply for a fellowship to spend 16, 18 months with us in the acquisitions department, and they learn from the ground up of all the levels of publishing. And so we are working with our 2nd fellow right now, and it's just been remarkable. I've learned more from them than what I could possibly teach them. I mean, just about the world and what they're interested in reading.
Yeah.
And in some cases, they might be the next generation of readers. They might be the next generation of editors and publishers. And so their innovation, their minds, the way that they just kind of see the world, it's helped us understand what we need to be as publishers to reach different types of audiences. Because the truth of the matter, and I say this all the time when I do something like this, is what dawned on me a couple of years ago is that we've never had this many generations of writers and readers. Just like
alive at the same time. That's right.
Yeah. I mean, I can be on a phone call. I remember a couple of years ago, I was doing conference calls with authors all day, and the oldest was 100 and the youngest was 24.
Wow.
Talk to everybody in between. Right?
Wow.
And I thought to myself, we've never had this many generations, and not just this many generations, but invested generations who have something to say, who want to be part of the world, who are still writing and creating and still, have a stake in how we move forward. So it's really, I think, important for us as publishers to recognize that this is an incredible generational time, as well as a cultural time, a historic time, all of those different things. Diversity, for me, in a lot of ways, is what I'm focusing on, is how the generations talk to each other. I have some authors who are born into social media, and I have some authors who've never used a computer before in their life. They still send letters in the mail.
Wow.
It's like speaking different languages, you know what I mean?
Yeah, right. Yeah, and when you combine that with the different ways that people read texts, and the different means, the proliferation of means to discover new books, it gets really complicated and rich and interesting. if you're situated to have exposure and deep engagement with all of those means, all those ways.
One thing I'm so interested. I'm sorry, was I interrupting somebody?
No.
One thing that I'm very interested in exploring is, mentoring relationships, right? You're a more established professional. Mentoring somebody young is doing a reverse mentoring, where the younger person is mentoring the more established person, because it's so easy to get stuck in your ways, right? And it's always good to be talking to a different generation, so your mind can always be open. Especially people are talking about social media. I'm so bad about social media. And social media is a great way to find new readers. And I love the idea of talking to young people and talking about, and just finding out, who do you listen to? Who do you go to? Who do you watch? Who do you watch on TikTok? Who are your influencers? And just figuring out better ways of marketing books by talking to younger generations.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, since we're talking, and I think that Pranisha, before you had talked about how do we sustain some of these initiatives, and now we're talking about kind of the conversations between generations. So is investing in the younger generations, is that a way of sustaining these diversity initiatives, or is that just one way? Is that a way to do it?
I think it's one of the ways. I think you have to invest in every generation. It's not just the younger generations.
Right.
I think, just talking from a generational aspect, I think, especially with marginalized communities, there's so much of older generations that are falling through the cracks.
Right.
That are not told. And, that's either it's lost, or we figure out how to sustain that, or how to archive it, or how to put it forward. And so it's not just who's coming next, who's already here. They need support, resources as well. And so I think it's a combination of it's sustainability, but just having conversations with each other, willing to share information, institutions, corporations investing, and not looking at the arts and the humanities as like a donation once a year, but actually wanting to have conversations with us, actually wanting to be part of how we make decisions, and vice versa. So, because I think, even within publishing, and we consider ourselves artistic and creative, it's a business. It is a business. And when you look at institutions alone, most of them are going towards the corporate model. So it behooves us to understand, I'm a poet, but I'm a director of the press. I can't play the light bill with a poem. Like we have to learn to kind of flex and be a yin and yang type of situation. And understand that even art, even creativity is in a lot of ways a business, especially if you want to share it with the world. So I think versing, regardless of race, class, age, cultural background, the way to sustain all of that is to kind of put the two different models of business and creativity together in a room and have these conversations about how each is going to survive, because business needs art too.
Right. Wow. Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Keeping these conversations between business and art, because sometimes that can be difficult to reconcile. I mean, for me, it's kind of difficult to think about reconciling those two things, but actually keeping that conversation and learning from both sides of the coin, I think it's really helpful. That's great. Yeah, because I was really interested in what you were saying about how do we sustain some of all of the things that all the work that we're doing right now. How do we make sure that we're building upon it? Yeah.
My hope someday is, right now we're so hyper aware about all of these initiatives, all the things that we're striving to do, and we're very, very focused on them. I'm hoping that as the years go on, it's just become a normal thing. Like, this is not something we're doing because it's extraordinary, but it's just, this is what we're supposed to do because this is the way you're supposed to do it. It's just normal. This is it. That I'm hoping I'll be around long enough to see that is the culture of a company. This is the normal way of doing things. This is not an extra effort on our part, but this is just the way things are done, because this is the right way to do it, and this is just how we do things.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That's great. Yeah, this is such a hopeful conversation. I feel good about it. So, do you have any advice for? Was anyone about to say something? Did I cut someone off? Oh, okay. Do you have any advice for a BIPOC working in the publishing industry right now?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, there's it kind of so much depends upon the situation that person is in. What role at a publishing house is that person in? One of the things that I like to engage early career and younger audiences around is the fact that it's not just acquisitions jobs, or it's not just line editing jobs. There's marketing work, there's finance work. If you're really into Excel, boy, do I have some work I would be willing to do. Especially if you can do those pivot charts. But I think my advice would be to remember what you love about this work. To work really hard to keep that with you every day, and to be good at what you do, which is something that I would tell anybody. Is listen twice as much as you talk. Not only for the practical things you're going to hear people saying, but also for the silences, for the things they're not saying, for the people you don't see at the table in these conversations.
Right. That's great. That's great.
I would say it's okay to be intimidated by certain things. But it's also okay to ask every question you want to ask. Because in a lot of cases, you are the original blueprint being there. So they might not have a model necessarily for what your experience is going to be and what you represent coming into that publisher or situation. So think of yourself as the blueprint of maybe what can be a guide for so many others that come after you. But it's okay to be intimidated, but also be fearless. You've earned the right to be there. Be really curious. And I mean, still, after all these years that I worked in this business, I mean, I still I'll have a meeting with the director of finance and I still ask 30 questions. Like, what is that? What is that? It's like I'm a little kid. And it's just like, how does that?
So much of the job is asking those questions.
Yeah.
And asking the next question and the next one and the next one and the next one.
Yeah. And I mean, I give the same advice to somebody working in this as I give an author. Our job is to answer the questions.
Right.
Our job is to make this work. And so I always tell authors, because I fuss at them a lot, they get so excited about getting a contract, they don't really read it. And so I sometimes have to, not all of them, but some of them, I can tell when they have not read their contract. And I'm like, okay, here's what's going to happen. We're going to go through this line by line so you fully understand what you're signing. And they're so over the moon that they got a book publishing contract and they can't wait to post it on Twitter or whatever. And it's like, do you understand what you're signing here? And so there's no excuse to be ignorant, because there's so many different resources and there's so many different, one of the best parts about, and Stephanie, you said it, one of the best parts of this job is you get to ask so many questions and you get to learn. Every single day, I learn something new. Yeah.
And the only other thing I would add to that, being if you're in publishing and you're BIPOC, is that in addition to everything my colleagues here said, is I would say just try to establish a community that you can be a part of, an affinity group, a safe space, a place where you know you can trust people and you can talk openly without fear of repercussions, without retaliation, because we always need something to talk about, especially if you're talking about matters of diversity and inclusion. You know, you may have witnessed some microaggression and you don't know what to do with it. So you need to find people you can talk to who you can trust.
Yep. And who understand your language, who understand what you're talking about, without you having to explain the whole world. That's a really strong piece of advice. Having someone you can talk to.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So some audience questions right now. So I'll go over to these. So Lisa Adams Lloyd says, as a new writer, you are all lending hope that someday I will find someone who appreciates and understands my voice, my word, my story with such eagerness and passion. All too often I hear the opposite from seasoned writers. Thank you. Great, thank you. My experience is...
I want to convert that into a plug for university presses. I can't help myself, but I just have to say that 2 out of the 3 of us who are working in publishing are from university presses, and one of the things that we offer, we are subject to the same pressures of the marketplace as any publisher. We're generally smaller, and we're generally able to give closer attention to authors, particularly new ones. And it's something that we pride ourselves on and care about and talk about a lot. So
that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Yeah. So Lisa Adams Lloyd also says that my experience has been limited representation with disabled populations in writing. Are there any steps being taken to make sure that this unique voice is being represented?
Yeah, I think when we refer to diversity and inclusion initiatives, we're talking about the full spectrum of BIPOC, LGBTQ, able is state of ability, and age, in fact.
Yeah.
And not just from the staff side, but also from the authors, from the topics, the subject areas, from the characters that are included. I'm sure Beth can talk a lot about trade book representation, like those characters that are brought to life for readers. We're all working on all of it because there's nothing but room for improvement.
With that, I would say we're running the gambit, and especially just in talking with the acquisitions team at Northwestern. I mean, we've looked in areas of the disabled community as a voice that we need to hear, especially disabled mental health. These are topics of conversation that are not just telling a story, but offering, kind of pulling the veil back on a lot of these communities to be represented in the right way. How that happens is being able to create a channel to tell their stories. So I think, as we try to face all of these different things, dialogues, movements, part of it is pulling the curtain back and bringing these voices forward so they can tell their stories, so that the rest of the world is not looked at as a minority. It's looked at as a part of a culture.
I mean, to me, it all boils down to the read. It really, that's what it boils down to. How powerful is the story? How strong is the voice? But in terms of, you say disabled populations, we have a couple of authors. I'll mention Haben Girma, who is blind, and she was a, oh my God, was she an advisor to Obama? Anyway, she had some, I'm sorry, I should have checked on her bio before. And we published Senator Tammy Duckworth, who lost a leg. So, and, she's she's a national stature, so she's I would put in a different category, but really it boils down to the read, whether you're writing a novel, whether you're writing nonfiction, and I'm sure Parnisha and Stephanie will say the same. It's just how moved we are by the story, how much we feel, yes, we can publish this book and we can publish this well.
Yeah, if you're writing like a house on fire, nothing else matters. And everything else matters.
I will say, you know what? In terms of our company, there's no slot. There's no like, oh, this is going to sound so offensive, but it's not like, oh, twice a year we have to publish a book by a disabled author. We don't think that way. It's about the book and how, and it's about our efforts to make sure we have enough submissions from people from all communities, so that we're reading as widely as possible from authors from different communities. But yeah, we don't have slots.
And then also, I don't know, Beth and Stephanie, if you all have like kind of faced this, because during the pandemic, I don't think we have received more submissions since I've worked at this press than during now. And it's so interesting that the interesting play a trick on us irony of this is that everybody feels they can tell their story. That doesn't mean that it's publishable. Everybody has the right to tell their story, but we still have either a certain standard or a certain, it's not even necessarily, I want to say the quality of the work, but we want a good story. And not just because you decided to tell your story. That's great. That's wonderful. You should have the right to do that, but it doesn't necessarily earn you the right to have it published. And I think that's where there's kind of like this, because I'm seeing really, really beautiful work, and I'm saying, oh, that's an interesting story, but it's not necessarily. So, and even obviously with the rise of MFA programs and different things like that, it's like everybody, we want to take everybody in, we want to open the floodgates, and my God, this unbelievable. So I kind of want to make that distinction. I don't know if you all have experienced that, but I kind of have to have these conversations with people like, yes, it is an interesting story. Yes, you are interesting, but no, this is not exactly what we're looking for.
Right. Yeah, fit is important. We all have areas that we specialize in. And if it doesn't meet the criteria to join that list, to join the lineage that is being established, then, and if it's not in conversation with other books on the list, or in conversation with topics and intellectuals in the world that we want to be in conversation with, then it's not necessarily a choice that we would make. But there are lots of options for people to publish their own work now, more options than ever. Lots of ways to do that.
There are no barriers to publishing. Yes, you can always self-publish. On our end, whenever, putting aside, let's just say it's a wonderful, wonderful read. It's just fantastic read. There are three things as a publisher. There are three things I always ask: who's the reader for this book? And because I work in a New York City publishing house, I always have to ask, what is the size of that readership? Is it big enough for us? And do we know how to reach that reader? And if the answer is yes, then more than likely it's something that we would buy.
So this is all really great. This is all great. So great. Marlene Lee asks, what about older white characters in novels? My main character is 80. Is she of interest in discussion of diversity and inclusiveness?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Of course.
I mean, that's the thing about this. That
diversity and inclusion is not just for people of,
right.
Yeah, sorry.
But that's exactly, you're exactly right. I mean, it's not, diversifying does not mean, even if it's somebody who, in the grand scheme of things, represents a group that has always either been in power or in privilege, their stories are still important too. It's not pushing one group by erasing another group, even if that group was always, you know, in power, in privilege, however you want to see it. That's not what diversifying is. I don't think that's what it is. So again, I'm interested in hearing what a 80-year-old white woman has to say, just as much as I'm interested in hearing what an 80-year-old Black woman has to say, or a 20-year-old, you know. It's not about taking something out to address something else. It's about how can we look at each other's stories and find value in them.
Right.
Yeah.
We have an author named Hendrik Groen, and we're about to publish his third novel. His first novel for us, the protagonist is a white male. He's 85 and a half years old. And no, he was 87 and a half years old, because we're about to publish a third book when he's younger, I mean, when he's 85 years old. And they're just absolutely delightful books. He lives in a nursing home, absolutely delightful books about the human spirit, about finding joy wherever you are. And actually, we're about to publish his book called All the Lonely People by Mike Gale. And he's retired. He's in his 80s. He's pretending to his daughter that he has a wonderful life when in fact he's lonely like everybody else. And then she says, I'm going to come visit you. So he's got 2 weeks to try to make his fantasy life come true. So she doesn't realize he's a sad, lonely man. But he's in his 80s in this book.
Nice. It's great. It's great. So another question, how do you deal with writers who are in the majority but miss the mark when it comes to BIPOC voices in their writing?
Are we talking about, I'm sorry, go ahead, Stephanie.
No,
answer.
I was just going to kind of, so as a reader, I have one reaction. And that's a reader of published work and a reader of work that I might publish. But if it doesn't ring true, or if it's harmful, it's, as far as I'm concerned, as far as my little piece of the publishing world, it's not going to happen. But that's true for everybody. That goes back to the writing. If the characters aren't compelling and interesting, if the story isn't well told, it doesn't make sense to give it the resources and the pride of place on the list. I think it can be done. I think there are people who've done it skillfully. I think there are people who do it. There are more examples of gender. But yeah, it's just another area of writing that has to be faithfully told.
Right.
If it's a book we have under contract and we have a concern about that kind of a miss, we would do what we would call sensitivity reads, where we would find an outside reader to read it and evaluate it and make recommendations for how to fix. And then we would address that with the author. So we want to help authors, and I'm sure authors don't want to miss the mark. I'm giving all the authors the benefit of the doubt and feeling that maybe they missed the mark, just not because they want to, but because they just didn't know. So I'm hoping they're looking for help in making sure they don't miss the mark. So we would try to give them that help with a sensitivity read.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a good, the idea of a sensitivity read is a really good point too. That I think it depends where it comes up in the process. You know, so does that make it to the point where you have a sensitivity read? Are there indicators in the proposal or the manuscript there might be a problem up ahead? And so in less resourced environments like my university press, we are particularly mindful of those kinds of things that show up in proposals or in early manuscripts, and try to intervene pretty quickly.
Yeah.
It's also, you know, just as publishers, having those conversations early on with the authors about what they feel their responsibility is when they're trying to represent something that they may not be or might not have, I don't know, a certain awareness. How is it intricate to the story? Because I think for me, as an acquisitions editor, I always really look for authenticity. And so if they are writing about other characters and they're missing the mark in some ways, or I see that, or another editor sees that, we try to have these conversations about what are you trying to accomplish by representing this, and then that kind of helps you funnel, because it's not just making it right in the book. They're going to have to talk about this on the side.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure you got it in check what exactly is going to go on here and what they're trying to do and what they're trying to represent, because even beyond the book, they still have to answer for what's written in the book when they talk about it, when they go on book tour, all those, and when questions come up. We want to be on their team in terms of representing them and understanding why they chose to do these different things or represent different types of groups.
And we take that responsibility very seriously. There was a conversation I was part of. It was a thriller, and one of the characters, the villain of the novel, used a slur when referring to another character, and there was back and forth. Should we change it? It's a slur. It's offensive. But he's a bad person. The person who said it. It's part of why he's bad. He's a horrible, offensive human being. So we decided it was fully intentional because it was part of the character of that villainous person. It was part of what made him a horrible person. So after back and forth, we decided that we would keep that. We would keep that in there because there was a good authorial reason for it.
Right. Yeah. Those are those difficult conversations that you have to have sometimes. Yeah.
They are difficult conversations because you're not sure what backlash is going to look like one day or another. And, it's unfortunate in some ways. I mean, not that I'm saying it wasn't warranted or it is warranted. I mean, I've seen authors, different people, like their whole lives destroyed within 24 hours because of something they posted on Twitter or Instagram. And so, as a publisher, and especially if it's like I tell people, it's like, I don't know what my authors are doing after 5 o'clock. They're at a bank, and then all of a sudden I get like all these things on Twitter saying, take their book out of circulation. You're their publisher. Like all of a sudden, obviously we take a certain responsibility, but there's also like this human part missing sometimes in this whole conversation. And so I feel like we can't be scared if we're trying to be authentic with our characters and our stories. There's some horrible stuff that's going on in our history. There's horrible people, monstrous people, and we write about them just like we write about rainbows and unicorns and sunshine and all that kind of stuff too. And if we really want to get at a lot of our truths, we're going to have to, publish some difficult stuff, write about some difficult stuff. And I should not be scared that all of a sudden we're going to, be destroyed on social media or whatever because of it. And so that's why I said we have to have these conversations with the authors early on so we can stand together and be able to answer for whatever comes. We're not going to know everything that's going to come, but at least have a united front and know the reasons why we did this.
Right. Yeah, I really like that idea of just having these conversations with the author as early as possible. Because, so these conversations are happening after you've already acquired the book, or so you've already acquired the book, or are they happening before when you're thinking about acquiring the book, or
Right. And one of the things, with specific cases is that there's a long time. Sometimes there's years between signing a contract and just getting the final manuscript from someone. And a lot can change in terms of what's okay in that amount of time.
Yeah.
And it applies to humanities and social science research the same way it does to creative works. Things change, and we just have to continue to be mindful and aware An interesting part of this conversation happened with some heat over audiobooks. So the voices that are reading
wow.
audiobooks,
Right.
and that kind of representation.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, we had that conversation, and we wanted to make sure, because we've done it in a few different ways. We're just venturing into the audiobook world, but that was a really important thing that we wanted to make sure with any third-party audiobook publisher that we signed with, that they were actually representing the author, the voices in the book. And it wasn't just, and we had to go into a whole discussion about that, representation in voice.
Yeah.
This different format of a book.
Right.
Yeah. So maybe I was interested in that. So what are some of the issues in audiobook representation?
Well, it's there's a book called Partnership, and you may remember more exactly. It's called How You Sound. And so it's about how you sound. And it's also, there are all of these great audiobook readers, audiobook actors, who apparently were not getting hired for jobs that they probably should have been the top candidates for, because, like so many things, the people who do the hiring hire from a stable set of people that they've worked with before, and then those people have worked with, and so the books that are the communities that are represented by the books that are being published and need to be read changes, but your stable of people to read those books does not. And so that shift has started to happen. As an avid audiobook listener, I am noticing a change in the kinds of voices I hear reading audiobooks.
Oh.
Yeah, it's very interesting how they, overall, they thought that this would be something systematic. Somebody's reading to you. It's going to a certain audience. Why you think it should sound like, and not to stereotype it, but why you think it should sound like the same, like an elevator voice, or voice machine voice across the board, when you're talking about, I don't know, somebody from LA, or somebody from even the dialects within our own country. It's kind of like, you're having somebody read to you. You want to hear the characters. That's another sense that's being engaged in when you're picking up a book. So it's very interesting how they, overall, it's been kind of treated in a systematic way, using basically the same type of voice across, no matter if it came from a person of this culture or this race, and the characters represented all these different things. And yes, I think that is changing, because we're making them change. Authors are not happy with how it's.
That's right.
Wow. That's fascinating. It's kind of happening across the board. So good. We are making changes, I guess. We're changes for the better. That's great. That's wonderful. So, who are some authors on your presses that you're kind of excited about?
Mike Gale, All the Lonely People. We have an author. Her name is Naima Koster. She has a novel out called What's Mine and Yours. And so happy because we just announced yesterday that it is Jenna Bush Hager's pick for her book club. So that's really very exciting. And I'm going to say, I'm sorry, what? I'm going to say one more author, Octavia Butler. I don't know if anybody. Okay.
We can all get behind that.
Octavia Butler. We've been publishing her since 1985.
Wow.
She died several years ago. She always wanted to become a New York Times bestseller. It's something she wrote on the cover of her journal, and it didn't happen during her lifetime. So a few years ago, we started reissuing her books with brand new covers, and last year, Parable of the Sower finally hit the New York Times list. And oh my God, we're so, so happy. Wherever she is, I hope you're so happy, because we're so happy that we made it happen. And so Octavia Butler, just really, really exciting personally for me, because I love her, and also as a great publishing story. Just again, in terms of the legacy, we've been publishing her for 85 years, and here's another new life for her with brand new introductions, brand new covers, and a New York Times bestseller.
That's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
And they're almost documentaries now.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Wayne State University Press has a long relationship with an independent publisher here in Detroit called Broadside Lotus Press. And this is a book, I'm relatively new to Wayne, that I, well, so confusing, recently discovered. It's an anthology of some of the people that Broadside Lotus has published. And of course, it includes Gwendolyn Brooks and Etheridge Knight and Audre Lorde and Ethelbert Miller. It's a really beautiful anthology with an audio.
Oh, great. That's awesome.
That's a gorgeous cover, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, it is.
I would say, I'm excited about everything that's coming. I'm excited about it. But, we've had some really special books that have come through. With what I'm excited about is our repeat authors that have come back. We're working with, we just released Ellen Hayes' poetry book, Blooming Fiascos, and she's a teaching artist in New York. She works for Dream Yard. And so this is the second collection of poetry we're doing with her. We're just about to release Carla Holloway, which we did her debut novel. And, she's a brilliant, she was a lawyer, a distinguished professor, and she decided to get into kind of mystery literary fiction. And we debuted her novel 2 years ago, A Death in Harlem. And now the continuation of this kind of detective series called Gone Missing in Harlem is about to drop in the next week or so. And so she's come back to publish with us. And so I love a lot of the repeat authors that we get to work with that come back. It lets us know we're doing something right.
Yeah.
But, just establishing that relationship. So I'm happy, obviously, about the new authors that we bring in, but I love when the repeats come back, and I see to kind of see their arc as writers and how they're growing. It's pretty amazing. So yeah, we have a new poetry book that we're going to be dropping in the fall, which combines poetry and opera. We've already got a visual poetry book. So basically the author is taking on kind of these sub-character of Leontine Price. It's an inspiration for him. And so it's a mixture of poetry and music. And so we're trying to be a little wild in what we do, and we're trying to mix the genres up together. And so we've been finding authors in that realm. So I'm excited about everything, but I'm excited about the ones that keep coming home.
Yeah, absolutely love that. So do you find yourself drawn to certain themes or subjects when you're acquiring a book?
I am always most interested in things I know nothing about. So I love to read books, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, subjects that I know very little about, or subjects probably mostly I always wanted to read and know about, and I never did. And so now here's a proposal, so I can read it and I can find out things about it. So that's what I'm really drawn to. And that means too, I love hidden figure stories in nonfiction or in novels. Characters who played a pivotal role in something, but we just never heard about them. So those are the things I really am very, very drawn to.
Right. That's wonderful. That's great.
Yeah, I would be the same way. I'm just so, I'm just so curious about it. Like I want to know everything, and you just get drawn to the things like, every time I read something, some of the manuscripts that come in, and I'm like, what kind of world is this? And I just get drawn in. But I also like things that are familiar that I just haven't seen written before. Things that either I come from, my family's from the South. And so, when I see different stories coming out of the South now in answer to what's happening right now, just a different take that kind of gives a new skin to a lot of culture and backgrounds and differences. So I agree with you, Beth, absolutely. But I also like seeing the familiar put into a new space.
I agree with you. That's great. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Absolutely. The great thing about working in a university press is it's a home for curiosity. It's if all of those little manuscripts and proposals that came in were little statuettes, it would look like a museum of curiosities, of all kinds of shapes and colors and ways of moving around in the world. That's what it's all about.
That's wonderful. Yeah. I love the descriptions of publishing. I love, the hopefulness that you all are kind of that you all are transmitting tonight, and we've learned so much. So I want to thank you all so much for your wonderful answers, for having engaged us all tonight. It's a huge thanks for everything.
You guys.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was wonderful being on the panel with you too.
And just to meet,
Jennifer.
I didn't know you before, so I'm happy to meet. I loved your answers and talking. So this was a good chat. This was like a porch chat.
Yes. So you all could not see me during this, but I've literally been smiling and nodding the entire time, like at everything. So I just wanted to come back on and thank you so much for being here, and to thank our viewers for being here as well. This is really just like a great discussion. I feel like rejuvenated and lifted after being here with you this evening. So thank you so much. I want to remind everyone that we will be back here on Thursday, and we will be talking about First Things First debut novels. So we hope that folks can join us. Thank you so much for being here this evening. I have learned a lot, and I'm sure our viewers have as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.